and welcome back to Music Theory Bootcamp. In the last video we discussed the time signature, basic rhythm, and a little bit about note values. In this video we're going to be talking about rhythmic concepts that are a little bit more complicated. That specific subject is called subdivision. Dun dun dun! If subdivision is a concept that has confused you for some time, this is the video for you. And if you aren't confused about subdivision, watch the video anyway. Who knows, you may learn something new. Here we go. Let's review. Before we begin to go into subdivision, let's review a little. In the last video, we looked at the many concepts of rhythm and how some of those individual rhythms fit into what is called a measure, or the visual dividers that indicate which rhythmic pattern goes where. The specific notes we addressed were the whole note, the half note, and the quarter note. The whole note, if you remember, is held for 4 beats. The half note, being half of the value of the whole note, equals 2 beats. And the quarter note, being the half of the half note, and the quarter of a quarter note, equals 1 beat. Did I mention math was involved in music? Well, now you know. We also discussed the time signature and how many measures were used to indicate how long each note is held in each measure. However, since we do not have the time to review all of that information, I'll leave the link to the last video below in case you need any review. For now, we are just going to focus on how to count the notes that come after the quarter note and how to use what is called subdivision. Dun, dun, dun. Let's meet the 8th note. The 8th note is the note that follows after the quarter note. Just like the name suggests, the value of the 8th note equals 1/8 of a whole note, or 1/2 of a quarter note. An 8th note is made up of a filled-in note head, a stem, and a flag. When there is more than 1/8 note in a row, the 8th note is made up of 2 note heads, 2 stems, and they are connected by what is called a beam. Now, this is the part that gets a little complicated. If a quarter note equals 1 beat of music, then how in the world do you count an 8th note? 2 8th notes are the equivalent of 1 quarter note, then the way we need to count them needs to fit into 1 beat. Enter subdivision. Dun, dun, dun. When we count a piece of music, we are usually counting at what is called a downbeat. The downbeat is when we count our quarter notes such as 1, 2, 3, 4. These are called a downbeat because the notes come down exactly on the beat. When we subdivide, we have to add something called the offbeat, which is the beat that occurs between the downbeats. These beats are what we call ands. So when you count 8th notes, including the offbeats, you count the beats 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. This is how you count 8th notes and the beginning of understanding what is known as subdivision. Now let's introduce the 16th note. The 16th note, as an individual note, is made up of a singular filled-in note head, a stem, and 2 flags. When there are multiple 16th notes in a row, you'll see them written with note heads, stems, and have them combined with 2 beams instead of 1 like the 8th note. 16th note is, you guessed it, 1/16 of a whole note and half of an 8th note. Seeing the pattern yet? Following the rules that we learned from subdividing the 8th note, we know that the 16th note needs to fit into 1 quarter note. Well, since we know that 2 8th notes fit into 1 quarter note, and 16th note is half of an 8th note, we now know that we have to put twice as many 16th notes in order for them to fit into the beat. So that means we will need 4 16th notes. In order to count these beats, we will need to add an extra sound to fill the space between the downbeats. Instead of just 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and that are used when counting 8th notes, we will count 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, thus breaking down the beat into even smaller fragments. The 32nd note. As I've said in a previous video, rhythmic patterns can potentially divide continuously forever and ever. So the next rhythmic pattern we will focus on is called a 32nd note. 32nd note is made up of 1 note head, a stem, and 3 flags. When drawn in a grouped pattern, it is made up of 8 notes that are barred together by 3 layered beams as shown in this diagram. We would count this pattern just as we did the others, which is by adding another sound that equals another subbeat. This rhythm would be counted 1 to Ida and a 2 to Ida and a 3 to Ida and a 4 to Ida and a. And that is a 30-second note. If it sounds like you're trying to talk like the Swedish chef, you are probably doing it right. Now, if you've been paying attention throughout these examples, you should have noticed that no matter how many times we divide the notes, you could always locate the beat. If you're wondering why, look closely. No matter how many times we added a new sound to represent a subbeat, we could always find the roots of the beats of the previous rhythmic patterns. If you look closely at the patterns in the 30-second note rhythm, you will see that a quarter note, eighth note, and 16th note broken down within it. Watch. Quarter note, 1, 2, 3, 4. Eighth note, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 16th note, 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and. No matter how many notes are in each beat, if you analyze the music enough, you can always find the beat, or at least other rhythms that you can latch onto in order to better understand what you were reading. If you understand what you're looking for, it is not as hard as it looks. And there you have it. Okay, that's the end of this video. If you're still confused about subdivision, don't worry, even professionals have struggled with it. However, if you leave a comment below, I'll be happy to answer any questions that might be able to alleviate some of that confusion. Alright, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that little notification bell. Bye!